Morning all. All right, so 3 games tonight in the National Hockey League, which means not just the preview in this video. We're going to talk about some other things as well, including the playoff picture. But the playoff picture is going to be impacted in the West by these games tonight. There are no Eastern teams playing, so if you're an Eastern fan, you can play some GTA or some NHL 23, whatever you'd like to do if you're not interested in these games. But I recommend watching them because they're kind of fun. That being said, the earliest game is at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, and it's Vegas in Minnesota. This is the third and final meeting for the regular season between these two. There is the possibility they meet in the playoffs. Minnesota won February 9th by a score of 5-1, and of course April 1st, just a couple days ago, Vegas won 4-1. The Vegas Golden Knights, 47-22-7. Their last 10 games are 7-2-1. They're 1 point clear of LA atop that division, and they're 2 points clear of Edmonton. Barbashev, since coming over from St. Louis, 17 games played, 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points. He's been very good. I wanted to mention Ben Hutton. Hutton, 25 games played this year, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. He's a depth defenseman. I have always liked Hutton. As long as he's not being overplayed, he can be useful, and it feels like he's got himself a home now in Vegas. So that's good to see. On the Minnesota side, 44-23-9. Now he'll end up somewhere else this summer. I apologize to Ben Hutton. But yeah, Minnesota 44-23-9 on the season. Their last 10 games are 6-2-2. They are first in the division, but only 1 point ahead of Colorado and Dallas. So it is not a big lead that they have there. Matt Boldy, 29 goals, 29 assists, 58 points, has been holding down the fort nicely when it comes to the scoring without Kaprizov. They are 7-2-2 minus Kaprizov. Johansson, 15 games, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points, has fit in really quite well since coming over in a trade at the deadline as well. And then at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, the Nashville Predators and the Dallas Stars renew their rivalry. Dallas has won the first 3 meetings. Nashville really has to win this one. October 13th, 4-1 win for Dallas. October 15th, 5-1 win for Dallas. And December 27th, a 3-2 win for Dallas. So the Preds, 38-29-8 overall. Their last 10 games, they're 4-5-1. They're 5 points back of Winnipeg in that final playoff spot. Glass, 13 goals, 18 assists, 31 points. Has honestly been playing really well lately. Tyson Barrie, since coming over from Edmonton, 17 games, 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points. Again, it has to be tough for him adjusting to going from a team that, is one of the top teams in the Pacific to a team that's below the playoff line and probably isn't going to make it. But he's done well there. Dallas 41-21-14. Their last 10 games, they're 5-4-1. They're 1 point behind Minnesota. They are tied with Colorado. Dodonov, 17 games, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points since coming over from Montreal. He's been good, and Ben has been excellent this year. 32 goals, 40 assists for 72 points. Wanted to throw him on the board. And then the final game of the night starts at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. It's the Arizona Coyotes and the Seattle Kraken. One of the weirdest scheduling decisions this year. This is the first of 3 meetings. They'll meet again April the 6th and April the 10th. So for Seattle, I do like their chances of making the playoffs in part for this, and we'll talk about it over here as well. So Arizona, 27-37-13 overall. Their last 10 games, they're 3-5-2. They're 22 points behind the Winnipeg Jets for that final playoff spot in the West. Barrett Hayden, 17 goals, 24 assists, 41 points. Has been absolutely remarkable as part of a really solid first line in Arizona. Anytime I see people saying, Arizona, it's the same stuff every year. It really isn't. This is different. They're actually building things up. It's just a slow build. Mosier, 7 goals, 22 assists, 29 points. I like J.J. Mosier quite a bit. There are a lot of good young players in Arizona. On the Seattle side, they're 41-26-8. Their last 10 games, they're 4-4-2. They are 1 point ahead of Winnipeg now. So Winnipeg's back-to-back wins have put Seattle in kind of a tough position, and they're only 3 points ahead of Calgary now. So, yeah, there's got to be some concern in Seattle on some level. Sprong's been quite good, 20 goals, 20 assists, 40 points, having a career year. And Larson, honestly, overlooked quite a bit, I think, considering 7 goals, 24 assists, 31 points, and really good defensive play for Seattle as well. So, it's taken quite some time. But Larson's producing and playing kind of the way that he was projected to when he was drafted 4th overall all those many years ago. So I want to talk about the playoff race and where we're at. So the Islanders are above the playoff line, but they're not out of trouble. They're only 2 points clear right now of the Florida Panthers. They're only 1 point clear of Pittsburgh. And the problem is they don't have games in hand on anybody. They've played the most games of anybody on the board I've got here, 78 games. Now, their upcoming schedule, they're at home against Tampa. They're at home against Philly. Of course, Tampa Bay has had their ups and downs lately. They're kind of locked into third place. So the Islanders should be more motivated in that game. Philadelphia, up and down. That's a game that if the Islanders are going to make the playoffs, they should win. Then they're at Washington. Same story. They should be motivated to win there. And then they're at home against Montreal. So the remaining schedule is not a difficult one for the Islanders. If they win that game against Tampa, their odds of making the playoffs, I think, are really quite good. They do have 33 regulation wins, which is the same as Florida. But, of course, if Florida wins a game and ties them, Florida would have more regulation wins in theory. They could, of course, win that one in a shootout or overtime just to keep things interesting. For Pittsburgh, 77 games, 86 points. Their regulation wins are 29, so they do need to stay ahead of Florida. They don't have the regulation wins tiebreaker on Florida. Their upcoming schedule, they're at New Jersey, and then they're at home against Minnesota. Those are the two toughest games, and then it gets easier. They're at Detroit, they're at home against Chicago, and then they're at Columbus. So the one thing about these final 5 games is there's no road trip and homestand. It's away, home, away, home, away. And so as long as they're fine with that, that doesn't bother them. Honestly, Pittsburgh might have a pretty good inside track at getting there. Florida's upcoming schedule, they're at home against Buffalo, they're at home against Ottawa, and then they're at Washington. So these 3 games, in the event that Pittsburgh loses at New Jersey and, say, loses at home against Minnesota, and if Florida wins against Buffalo and Ottawa, that could make it look like, hey, so Florida's got that spot. But the final 2 games for Florida, they're at home against Toronto, they're at home against Carolina. If Toronto is motivated by just wanting to finish the season strong, if Carolina is still playing to win the division, those could be tough. And at the same time, you've got Pittsburgh playing at home against Chicago and at Columbus. We'll see. So there might be a bit of a mirage if Florida gets ahead of Pittsburgh. That could be something that goes the other way if Pittsburgh wins their final few games and if Florida does stumble in those final few. Should be interesting. Let me know who you think is going to stay above the line. On the Seattle side, 75 games, 90 points to be the number 1 wild card in the West. They have 32 regulation wins, which is less than Winnipeg, but they've also played 2 less games than Winnipeg. Their upcoming schedule is busy, but mostly winnable. So, as mentioned over here, they got 3 games left against Arizona. They're at home against Arizona tonight. Then they go to Vancouver. Then they're at home against Arizona. Of course, Vancouver's just a 2.5-hour drive from Seattle. Then they're at home against Chicago, and then they're at Arizona. So, Arizona, Vancouver, Arizona, Chicago, Arizona. That if they finish below the playoff line, there won't be anybody to blame but themselves on that one. I'm wearing Seattle because I don't think they fall out. But then they finish the season with back-to-back against Vegas. So, if they do stumble in the games against Arizona, of which they have 3, then they're going to have to get wins against Vegas, which may not be that easy if Vegas is fighting for first overall in that division and potentially fighting for first in the West, right? Then you've got Winnipeg, 77 games, 89 points, 33 regulation wins. They've been playing better lately. And their upcoming schedule, they have their fate in their own hands. They're at home against Calgary first. That game is absolutely huge, should be fantastic. Then they are at home against Nashville. Nashville's not on the board, but they're not far out. It's just I wanted to keep it down to the most likely teams to make it, because then it'd be, well, if you're going to include Buffalo, you got to include Ottawa. Well, if you're going to include Nashville. So anyways, it ends up filling up the entire board and gets kind of silly. Because at this point in the season where you've only got 5 to 7 games left, teams charging from behind and getting a spot, very, very rare in the National Hockey League. So for Winnipeg, after the Calgary-Nashville games, they're at home against San Jose. I would normally say that's a slam dunk, but Winnipeg's already lost twice to San Jose. Then they go to Minnesota and they go to Colorado. So if they win the games against Calgary and Nashville, that should get them, and they should be able to stay above the line. And then hopefully they don't need those games at Minnesota and Colorado, because both the Wild and the Avalanche, of course, embroiled in a battle for first in the Central. Calgary, their upcoming schedule, they are 2 points behind Winnipeg. They've played the same number of games. They've played 2 more games than Seattle. So again, Seattle's kind of in the driver's seat, even though they're only 2 points ahead of Winnipeg and 3 points ahead of Calgary, when you consider 2 games in hand, and they've got 3 against Arizona. So upcoming for Calgary, they're at home against Chicago. They need to win that, right? If they don't win that one against Chicago, and, then they got to go to Winnipeg. That absolutely makes it a 100% must win, and even then, they'd still be 2 points back if that were to be the case. Then they go to Vancouver, and then they're at home against Nashville and at home against San Jose. So they have 2 games, or they have 1 game against Nashville, 1 game against Winnipeg, 2 against teams that they're directly competing with for those final playoff spots. It should be a very entertaining battle down the stretch. Really, really should, as we're about a week and a half away from the end of the regular season. The postseason begins 2 weeks from tonight. So that's going to be awesome, and there's at least 2 teams on this board that will not make those playoffs, and I think it's great that we're seeing a battle this year that I said we would get, and I remember people saying, well, there was 20 points between these teams, and the East, I can't see teams making up the difference. Remember, every season teams start at 0. What you did last year, great. Do it again this year. It is relentless. So, yeah, let me know in the comment section below which teams you think make it in the East and in the West. All right. So the Flames last night with a multi-goal comeback. That was the 139th of the season in the NHL. If you want to do the percentages, overall in the NHL, there's 1,312 games played. Not that I've counted or anything, but that breaks the record from 2018-2019. Now, it's worthy of note here as well that we do have 32 teams in the league now, so there's more games being played. Every time you add a new team, there's 41 more games added to the schedule. So that definitely would mean that you're going to get more comebacks. But you also should get more shutouts because, again, there's more games being played, but we haven't really seen that. So, yeah, new NHL record with comebacks. I think this says a lot for the way that the coaching has changed, and also players' belief. You don't see it nearly as many games where when a team gets down by 2, they just give up. And we used to see that a lot. 2-goal lead, and okay, that one's done. I can watch something else. That's not really the case anymore. For Montreal, so injury news. Monahan's had groin surgery. His season's done. We kind of suspected it might be. Belzile has a fractured leg. His season is done. Savard's season is done. They join all of the rest of the Montreal Canadiens, at least it feels that way, whose seasons are finished. Montreal has gone through a lot of injuries, and keep in mind that before the season started, they weren't expected to be a playoff team anyways. I think they've put together a remarkable record considering the amount of injuries that they've had, the number of young players that they've been employing, especially on the blue line. If they can be healthy next season, Montreal could be pretty darn good. Speaking of injuries, Kirill Kaprizov did skate with the Minnesota Wild today. When asked, all Dean Evason said was he's progressing. So that's as far as he's going with that. Now, also, Mason Shaw is done for the season. Dean Evason said lower body injury, but it's been Jesse Pierce is reporting that it is the 4th ACL tear that Shaw's gone through. That has to be awful because by the time it's your 4th, you know exactly what's happened. So when the injury happens, you're like, I tore my ACL again, because you'll know that pain, you'll know what it is, and it has to be just absolutely just heartbreaking at that point. Because Minnesota, again, right now they're first in the division. Shaw doesn't want to be out. So apparently it's been tough for him. And again, he's young. That's the best part of it is he's young. He can spend the summer rehabbing and getting that strength back. And hopefully he's able to play a full 82 games next season. I like Shaw. He's got some energy. Bottom 6 forward. He may end up having some top 6 upside at some point. But I never like to see a player have a season-ending injury like that. Nope, not even those players. Nope, not him either. Anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always, including who you think's going to win tonight in these games. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.